Welcome back. I have a 2001 Buick Park Avenue here. Having a problem with the gas gauge where it works sometimes, doesn't work other times. It's typical of a sending unit going bad. This car has close to 160,000 miles. The sending unit's in the tank. You can buy it separately and just get the sending unit. But at 160,000 miles, I don't want to have to go through this twice, so I'm going to replace the whole fuel pump assembly, which the sending unit is attached to. So here we're inside the trunk. This is the passenger side towards the front of the trunk. And this is the access panel. We're just going to take these 7mm screws out of here. So I'll get a putty knife, get that loose. Okay, and this is what you'll typically see on these. I'll show you in a second here. I'll move you in to give you a better shot. So you can see the lock ring around the edge of that, which is just all rusted up and corroded. So we're going to actually end up replacing that lock ring. You can get that lock ring as well. We'll replace them both. It's pretty torn up. We'll just clean it up a little bit and be careful in here. When we drive this off of here, I'm going to use a brass punch. I don't want sparks in here. We're going to do that, clean that up before we disconnect the fuel lines. I don't want any fuel up in here while I'm doing that. We'll see if we can break it loose. So here you can see I have this lock ring off now. What you didn't get to see is me taking probably a good half hour of just a punch and a hammer, working it back and forth, breaking all the corrosion off of it, and just working it back and forth little by little. And it took me a good half hour to get that corrosion all broken up where it would come off, basically. Well, a couple points here. You got to be careful, obviously, there's gas. These fuel line and return line that are clipped on right here, leave them connected up until you get this ring loose. You can see it's spilled gas. As soon as you disconnect those lines, you're going to get a little bit of gas in here, and that's not cool when you're banging on things, and you definitely don't want a spark up in here. So leave them connected up till you get this, and as soon as you get this loose and it starts to go, then you can disconnect these lines, and then you can undo the rest of this lock ring. But you can see this lock ring is just all beat up, and it's going to be replaced too. Like I said before, I think I said before that you can get this lock ring, and this is really, generally speaking, the hardest part of this whole job is getting this lock ring undone. They corrode, well, depending on where you live, northeast here, so they corrode and they go bad, and they corrode, you know, they just get really hard to get undone. But that's about it. I'm going to pull this out of the tank. If there's anything special about that, you may have to rotate it a certain way to get it out of there, because it does have an arm on it for the fuel sending unit. And then I'll show you when I'm done. So you can see I've got this partially lifted out of the tank. It's just kind of sitting there. Before I do that, I'm going to get a container, because as you pull this out, you're going to have to tilt it, and you're going to get fuel out of these two lines here, and you'll get fuel that's sitting in the base of it, and you want to have a container to dump that into. So I'm going to get a container before I finish pulling that out. See if I can do it without spilling it all over the place. I'm trying to work around the camera. It's making it a little difficult for me. There you go. It's spilling a little bit, but I'm spilling it back into the tank. The seal is still on the bottom. I'll show you that in a second. I just set that over in the container out of the way. So there's a seal right around the hole where the pump goes in. I'm going to leave that in place for right now. I'm going to get a couple rags and clean up all the corrosion. I don't want that getting down in the tank. So I'm going to carefully clean that up before we put the new pump in there. So one thing you'll need to keep off of your old pump is these tabs, these quick connect tabs for the fuel lines. I've got one off. I find the easiest way to get these off is just kind of roll them back. Get a hold of them and roll them back like this. You get them far enough, they should pop right off of here. They'll pop right past that fitting, and you can slide them off. Just be careful with them, and then you end up with these two fittings. You're going to put them onto the new pump when you get the new pump. So I wanted to show you, this is your fuel tank sending unit and your fuel level for your gauge. And you can see it's basically a potentiometer. and as the fuel level goes up and down in the tank, it moves along this scale here. But I don't know if you can see this on, hopefully you can see this on the camera, but if you look towards the end of the scale, it's nice and shiny, but in the middle it's been worn down a lot. You can see it's kind of black here and worn down. That's why this isn't working right. So this will work down to about half a tank, and then it just starts freaking out, and you get all kinds of weird readings once it gets below half a tank. So you can see the wear, and that's what happens on these. And as I said, you can just get this part and replace just this, but with close to 160,000 miles on this car, I'm not even going to mess with trying to separate this and take a chance that the fuel pump's not going to go bad. You're just going to replace the whole thing. So I've got the old fuel pump here, new fuel pump, seal, connector kit. All these have been converted over. The original pumps have this 2x2 connector for the harness, and every pump that I've seen now has a straight inline 4 connector, so they give you that connector along with wiring and instructions on doing it. So we're going to do that. Of course, you don't want to solder anything or have flame near that top of that tank. It's probably not a good idea since there's fuel oil vapors there. But we're going to go through and splice this new connector in and hook it back up. I've got my clips that I took off the old pump and put them onto the new pump. They are 2 different sizes. So with the new fuel pump comes this little connection kit. It's got some heat shrink in it and crimp connectors, and they recommend that you actually, the old 2x2 connector, you cut that off and crimp these new ones. I'm not going to do that. You're just asking for trouble when you're crimping it, and then you have to shrink these, and I'm not going to shrink them anywhere near that tank. So this harness, the 2x2 connector, I've cut off. I left a little bit, obviously you can see, inch or 2, and I went into the wheel well on the passenger rear side, and there's another connector, and you can pull this harness down off the gas tank. So I pulled it out of the car, disconnected it, pulled it out of the car, and I'm going to match up the new fuel connector wires for this fuel pump with the diagram that it comes with the instructions for the fuel pump. And I'm going to solder them and heat shrink them. And when you heat shrink them, use the heat shrink that has adhesive in it, and it will seal that connection so you won't get corrosion. So I'm just going to show you one of these. I mean, it's nothing really exciting to do here. You just got to go through them one at a time and match them up to the diagram, like I said, that comes with the new fuel pump. Hopefully you can see that. And put a little flux on there. Brush here. A clean brush. Get some flux. Get a little bit of flux on it. Get this out of the way here. I've already got the shrink wrap on the wires, obviously, because if I don't do that, I can't get to them. So now I'm going to heat it. Situate it here. Heat it up. Here's my paperwork. Solder. So I'm going to do that to all 4 of the wires. Like I said, matching it to the diagram. Make sure you match it up. And then I will put the shrink wrap on there, and then I'll work on fishing that back up above the gas tank and clicking that harness back together. Like I said, it comes with these little crimp connectors in the kit, and I don't recommend using these. It's just, you're asking for trouble. They're going to corrode on you and give you problems. So pull the harness out. It's a little bit of work, but pull it out. You're going to have to fish it back up in there, but we'll figure out a way to do that. When I figure it out, I'll let you know how I did it. And then you won't have any problems if you solder these and do them correctly. So here you can see the new pump assembly. Got my new lock ring on it. Got my connectors for my fuel lines on there. Connected my arm for my sending unit. You can see the wires there. I fished them back up through. I actually had to What I did was I loosened the 2 bolts underneath at the back of the gas tank and let the gas tank just drop down maybe half an inch to probably half an inch is all I needed. Fished those new connectors up, and they're sitting there ready to go. So now we'll just put it back in. I have the new seal. Now, dump my old seal out of there already. Yeah, it's right here. Put my new seal in, make sure everything's clean. Get that in place. And of course it does not want to stay put. Okay, there we go. And I'll fish this down through there. The arm in there first, and then the filter sock. Slide it in. Hopefully you can see this. I can't see what you're saying, but I can't tell at all if you're seeing any of this. Get my fuel lines out of the way. Electrical clip. Well, and get my lock ring where it should be here. Try to. Just push it down into place. Get it started. Just make sure it's started everywhere it is. So it's going to be hard for you to see this, but I'm going to have to drive that back in and just put that lock ring. I've got the fuel lines facing the way they should be facing. My electric connectors are where they should be, so I'm going to take this lock ring and I'm going to just drive it back in. It's probably going to shake the camera, so I don't know how much of this is going to be any good to you, but so I've got my lock ring back on. Not quite as bad as taking it off. Probably took 5 or 10 minutes, but you've got to drive it back into place so it locks it down again. So I've done that. I'm going to hook my fuel lines back up here. Push them in, make sure they clip onto the connectors. I hope. We'll see. Better. Right now it's fighting me tremendously, and I have no idea why. Not sure why it's fighting me on this. I think it's just got to get it lined up just right. There we go. Clipped into place. Make sure it clips into place. They are 2 different sizes. I didn't realize that when I first took them off, but they are. Alright, both clipped on. Make sure they're clipped into place. Have my electrical connectors here. Clip them back on. Good. My new 4-pin connector. Clip that into place. Now, I'm going to leave this access port off for now until I run this a little bit. I'm not going to drive it around, but I'm going to actually start it up and let it run. Make sure I don't have any issues. Make sure I don't have any vacuum leaks or anything like that, or fuel leaks. I don't expect any of these are clipped on. So I just want to make sure that everything is the way it should be before I put the cover back on and vacuum in here. I will put that cover and then vacuum all this area with all the crud, corrosion. That's the hardest part of this job, is the corrosion. Once you get past that, it's not too bad. So that's about it. As you can see, my beard's a lot shorter and my hair's a lot shorter right now because I forgot to shoot the very end of this, and then as soon as I finished the job with the fuel pump assembly, I cut my hair. So now I'm doing the outro to this, or the finish to it. It's not a very difficult job. You just got to take your time. The hardest part is corrosion. This took me a good half an hour, and I'm not exaggerating, to get this off initially. It's just corroded right on there. If you live southwest United States or somewhere where you don't get rust, then this is probably a couple minutes. Putting the new one on took maybe 5 minutes. You got to kind of, it's tight. You got to pound it back in there pretty good. Pulled the harness. I pulled that harness down through the rear passenger wheel well. I don't like to crimp those connections for the new connector for the revised fuel pump assembly, which has an inline 4 connector instead of the 2x2. I just don't recommend crimping it. It's going to corrode. You're going to have problems with it. Pull it out of there. Take a few extra minutes. I actually loosened the 2 bolts at the back of the gas tank for the straps and let it drop about half an inch, and that's all it took. I could feed those connectors right out of there, put them on my bench you saw earlier, and soldered them, then just fed them right back in with a wire, pulled them through, no problem. Got it all done. I hope it helps you out if you have to do this. I hope you like the videos. If you do, subscribe below. Thanks for watching.